This is Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story. Exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Bo Tiffany.
Hi, Theresa. Thanks for coming on Digital Voices. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Bo?
I'm doing great. I was inspired by your story as it kind of lines up with mine a little bit and how I started Digital Voices. You were a victim of medical error, and this happened to you in Canada, where you're from. And I found that a lot of your experiences kind of aligned with mine, in that the issues that we have in healthcare don't necessarily, they're not constrained by borders. What you've been doing in Canada to spread awareness and to advocate change, I thought was really important. And I don't find a lot of resources here in America. And I thought maybe I would explore a little bit of that as well to give some ideas and inspiration of things that we can institute here to help strengthen our voice as a people for healthcare reform. And before I get into that, let me just ask you about your roots. Where are you from?
I grew up just outside of Toronto, Ontario, and we pronounce that Toronto, by the way.
Big family or small family?
No, an average family. There were 3 children, my 2 parents, and we were the typical family. My mother was the Girl Scout leader, my father was the Boy Scout leader. We had a cottage. We had tons of family around. We were happy. We were doing our thing. As kids, we thought that was normal. As adults, I look back and I'm grateful for what we did have. But my mother died suddenly when I was 16 of the same thing I've been inflicted with. So it was a very traumatizing time. It was a time that was in the early 70s. It was a time when doctors handed you a cigarette and a bottle of Valium to get through your trauma.
It's changed
so they
a lot.
added trauma to the trauma. Yeah. So it definitely.
Can I dig a little bit? What kind of things were you interested in as a teenager?
Well, we had a cottage, so we were interested in summer. Everything summer.
Outdoorsy.
Yes, we were all out skiing and swimming and never put a pair of shoes on until Labor Day weekend. May 24th weekend, we started taking our shoes off and didn't put them back on until September when we went back to school. We had 2 sets of friends. So we had our cottage water summer friends, and in the winter we had our home friends. And for me, I like to snow ski. So I either had shoes or boards on my feet all year round. My brother played hockey. So we did a lot of things as a family. We were the kind of family that every Sunday, no matter what, we had the dinner table set, and everybody we could find on the street who didn't have dinner came in and had dinner with us. So lots of Boys and Girl Scouts.
Sounds like you had some teachers for parents. I like to always think of my, because I was in Scouts, and I thought my leader was probably one of my more influential teachers growing up. Was that kind of the same for your parents? They were kind of teachers by...
Absolutely. My mother was orphaned young, so I think her goal in life was to create a family, whether it was a family that she gave birth to or was a part of bloodwise, or if it was a family she collected. When my mother died, she was 36, and the funeral or the viewing had so many people, we had to extend it. And people were arriving from the bus stop to say, "Oh, I knew your mother from the bus stop." Everybody knew my mom and everybody knew my dad. So it was a special way to grow up. And like I say, had no idea anybody grew up any differently.
Yeah. Well, it's something that you learn from through example too, and that caring heart, I think, probably helped shape you as a person. And when you lost your mom, what was that time like for you? That must have been traumatic.
It was a horror story. My mom died suddenly. We were so in shock. My father could not deal with it. He lost the love of his life. So we didn't actually see much of him. And I understand it. It's too bad it went that way, but he just couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle coming home. He went to work, and wherever else he went, he usually didn't come home till everybody was in bed. So we lost two parents.
Were you the oldest, or where'd you fit in age-wise for your brothers?
I was the middle child. I was 16, my brother was 17, and my sister was 12.
Who ended up picking up kind of mom's role after she passed?
Me. We had an uncle who had no children. He was married. He had no children. He was a fire captain in Toronto. And he was around a fair amount, but he didn't impose, because in those days you don't impose.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's sisters were around, but again, they didn't impose. Neighbors were around, but they didn't impose. They were there if we went to them. And I think from afar, they were always watching us, but we were very lonely.
Yeah.
We didn't know what to do. We were kids. And I was honest in saying the doctor handed me a cigarette the day he told me my mother died. And he gave our family a jug of Valium and said, if you're feeling sad, just take one of these. So it was also started on a road of some very negative practices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a life changed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, life changed big time for you.
Huge.
What were those next years like then? How did that play out?
Oh, as an adult, I can look back and put names to it. I was looking for that family again. I was always trying to find that family feeling that we lost so quickly in one day. So for me, it started out with a marriage that should never have happened. I was too young. And, you know, for other members of the family, it was addiction that went on for too long. And, I think it was just always trying to grasp and find that family again.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't. Those aren't instant things that happen. You have to build those. So I did, and you move forward that way, because now that's your goal. The goal is to have a family and to create that family I lost.
So for you, you started kind of building a surrogate family, or building your own family to kind of replace the one that you lost as a teenager, right?
Yes. And, some of the mentors are the wrong ones. You find those out the hard way.
Yeah.
Some of them you don't realize how important they were to you until later.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask about that, because oftentimes my guests see, looking back, there's people or events that help steer them in the course of their life to where they are now. Did that happen with you previous to what you experienced with the healthcare?
I think for me, I ended up with a lot of issues with loyalty and fear. I never wanted to be hurt that much again.
Right.
So I think that there were a lot of opportunities that came to me that I rejected, because once it started to feel too good, I feared it would be too hard to let go of.
Yeah.
So that comes in the form of relationship. It comes in the form of, friends. Once a friend does something that you feel is disloyal and you get hurt by it, you run.
Right.
That was a pain that I could not handle. It was a pain that was, and I've talked to other people, and I've certainly had counseling over the years and talked about what happens when everybody says you're only given what you can handle, and that's actually not true, because there becomes a point when you can no longer handle it.
Right. I totally agree. I've said that recently myself.
Yeah, and avoiding that place became a big part of my life. Avoiding and it's not a positive thing. You destroy relationships that otherwise could have or should have been very healthy, and you learn the hard way.
But you're still
and
learning.
You don't always understand all the time. Absolutely, I'm 65 years old. I think the older we get, the more we learn, if we can remember it.
So you eventually, sounds like you had some things that you had to sort out. But when you finally did, you started to become ambitious. You started your own company. What did you start, and what was your role? What did you end up developing there?
I'm going to preface that, if you wouldn't mind. Something I learned in midlife, whatever midlife number. I don't know what the midlife number is. I guess it's different for everybody depending on when you die. But somewhere I started to learn about focusing on something. Nobody had ever taught me that, and I think there's a lot more written about it philosophically. About focusing on the positive, focusing on something, people doing these, I forget what they're called, like a storyboard of what they want in their life, where they look at it every day. That's what I'm going for. Mm-hmm. I somewhere along the line, when my life was going well, I was happily married, and I had a son. I started realizing that I was starting to create my own destiny. That if I tried to do it consciously, it didn't work. But if I kept something going in my mind, it happened. And if I was excited about something, it would be in my mind as a very positive thing. And so after I had my son, I had been working as a legal assistant for almost 20 years. I had a huge background. It was in the intent of my mother that I go to law school, which didn't happen after she died. So it was something for some reason in my bones. But I was tired of being the secretary, and I had the opportunity to teach a legal assistance course at a private college, which I stepped into without much thought, and realized very quickly that it was a sort of mentoring, and I loved it. I loved seeing the light bulbs go on. I loved seeing people go through a transition. In the circumstances I was in, it was a lot of single moms trying to reconnect to their career, make things better. So unfortunately, the school I was working with had some pretty bad practices, and there were some issues. And of course, me having so much background in law, I decided that I was going to take that on. And this would be a very long story, but the ministry that governed private colleges in BC actually approached me and said, working with you during the dismantling of this college, we would like to ask if you would be interested in opening one. And I just kind of laughed and went, yeah, right. Me? But it was here's where it started, is I could not stop that ball from rolling. It seemed like the more I thought about that and got excited about it, even though deep down I didn't think I had it in me, I didn't know what I was doing, the more opportunities that got thrown my way. And even my husband said, you can't stop this. I mean, you sit down and say, I don't know where I get the money, and the phone rings and somebody says, I've talked to so-and-so and I understand this is what you're doing, and I'm here to offer you a business loan for which once you've paid half, the other half will be forgiven. And then somebody else called and said, I understand you're looking for this, and I can offer you a $20,000 grant. And I had done some work as a friend for a friend who was starting a Mid-Island Métis Nation here on Vancouver Island. They needed someone to help with the society, and in doing so, we found my background, my First Nations background, through my father, and I became part of the Mid-Island Métis. And through that, I started to get Aboriginal Business Canada grants and lease loans. And so the force was there, and the force was guiding me, and I got into that business, and it just took off. It was awesome. And somehow, I understood what to do. And I had no training. I had no training in any of this, but there it was. So I owned a private business college on Vancouver Island in BC. And it was awesome. I was proud. It was the greatest thing. And it grew in 4 years from one class to 6. It was making money. Life was wonderful. Here is a repeat of my childhood. Mm-hmm. And then one day it wasn't. Because that's when I got sick.
Mm. In that journey,
and so, mm-hmm.
It's almost like a chapter, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like every time the chapter turns, it's because we've picked up tools to prep us for the next chapter. Seeing what you've done with TEDx and also with the Patients for Patient Safety of Canada, all of those things feel like what you've built, those foundational pillars that you brought to the table through that journey and that you developed, prepped you for this next challenge, if you will. Do you feel that same way?
Absolutely. And I wish that I could walk through some of these chapters, and when I get to the end of them, not feel so devastated by the end of it.
Yeah.
I wish I could force myself somehow to understand that there's a reason for the end of that chapter. And for whatever reason that chapter ended, whether that was, obviously a good thing or a bad thing, it was a reason. And here we are to go on to the next one. But unfortunately, there's so much trauma that happens when you end a chapter when you weren't ready to end it.
Yeah. Are you religious?
I was brought up Catholic. I do not have... When I got sick, I was very sick. And, I was told, bring in the family, do what you need to do, because we can't guarantee you're going to make it. Mm-hmm. And I went looking for the answer. What's after this? And I grew up with a lot of old Catholic values, and none of which I felt were really healthy. And I just I wasn't always a good person. Was I going to hell at the end of this? And who are we and what are we? And I started getting into quantum physics. I read everything, and every time I read something, it led me to something else. And some of it was just trash reading, and some of it was just beyond my comprehension. But with balance, somewhere in the middle, it balanced, and I found my spirit. I found what I would consider my religion, and I think we all have our own. It's our belief, and once I found it, I exhaled, and that's when I moved forward again and started to do something about what had happened to me and where could I go from here. Mm-hmm. So again, another journey.
But it's that tenacity that keeps propelling you. When we look back, it's just interesting how individual our journeys are and how it preps us for that next chapter. And your next chapter went on to start speaking out about what you went through with your illness. And sure. When you got sick with heart disease. It was the flu that you got sick with, but genetically you're predisposed to having the flu enter your heart. Is that right? Yeah,
that's correct. So it's a genetic disposition. Okay. And you have to hand it all the right things for it to happen. Mm. So it's the flu virus, the normal everyday flu virus, not the COVID. So COVID is also like a flu virus. Mm-hmm. The flu virus went into my heart, and it had that opportunity because I was working 6 and 7 days a week. I was taking care of a young child. I was wearing myself thin. Mm-hmm. I was enjoying it, so I wasn't paying attention to it. It was a little ball of energy, and I got the flu. I was away for a weekend. It was a retreat with a girlfriend who also worked that hard, and we would do this twice a year. And I arrived at the retreat on Friday, and I said, I don't feel well, and I didn't wake up till Sunday. I was delirious the whole weekend. And, of course, everybody was drinking and having a good time, and she'd pop in and go, are you alive, poke, poke? And I obviously made a grunt, and I probably should have been in a hospital or at least had been checked up on. But I got up Sunday and went back home and went back to work. Like I had the flu. But everything started to go bad. And what had happened in hindsight, I know I've been educated now that the virus went into my heart and it said, oh, I like being here. Let's explore. And it started to do some damage walking around in there, left some scar tissue. And it spent as much time as it wanted to and then left or died or whatever it does. And because of that, my heart enlarged. And when your heart enlarges, it becomes inefficient. Mm-hmm. And it's like an elastic band that's been played with too much. And now it's, more floppy. Mm-hmm. And that allowed the fluids to start building up in my lungs. And things just started to get worse. Now, my doctor, who was fully aware, like every doctor, the first time you see them, I filled out the form, said about heart history, and in what way. And of course, my mother died of heart disease when I was 16 and so on. And so did my grandmother die when she was young. And I automatically felt, as we all do, that if I said something to my doctor once, my doctor remembered that. My doctor knew me. She always called me by my first name. Mm-hmm. She was always really friendly, so I must be important to her.
Right.
And so every time I went in, she would take one piece of that puzzle and go down a journey. So one day it was, I must be allergic to something because we got a new dog. And one day you know, it must be you're going into your 40s. It could be early menopause. Let's go down that road. But she never took, I never took all the pieces and put them together. We never took the time to do that. Mm-hmm. The second part was I would go in, and as long as I would go in feeling horrible, out of breath, you know, what's wrong with me? I have no energy. And I was gaining weight. And we had an answer for it. Well, you're not taking care of yourself. You're working too much. You're doing this. You're doing that. She would tap my back, listen to something, mm-hmm. you know, whatever. And every time I walked out, I felt well assured there's nothing wrong with me because my doctor said so. And yet I knew something was wrong.
Right.
I knew this wasn't right. Nothing was right. But that's what you do. You got reassurance, you walked away, and you put all your cards on that table. Mm. And it wasn't till my team at the school started saying to me, you have to have lung cancer or something. Listen to you, Terri. You can't even make it up the street without going in and putting your head on your desk. Mm-hmm. If you don't go and do something about it, we're going to do something on your behalf. So that week I went to the doctor 3 times, and I said, I must have bronchitis, something's wrong. Listen to me. You can hear me gurgle. You know, I can barely take a breath in without you hearing it. And she checked my back. She checked, you know, there's nothing, Terri. You don't have bronchitis. You don't have pneumonia. You don't have this. We did it 3 times that week. The same week I went in, I thought I'm just going to keep going in until something happens. And then finally on the 3rd day, I said, just give me a chest x-ray. I must have lung cancer. I want a chest x-ray and I want it now. And so I did. This was 8 or 9 months after the start of all this. Mm-hmm. And when I went to get a chest x-ray, they saw an enlarged heart. And they said, the hospital was right next door. And they said, just please go into an emergency and say your name. They're waiting for you. And a doctor came up and said, you're in heart failure. Your blood pressure is through the roof. Your resting heart rate is 223. Mm. If you're about to go into cardiac arrest, and I don't know what's causing this, but we're going to call in your husband and son or your family. And they told him that if she goes into cardiac arrest, we doubt she will make it. The size of her heart. And then I did. They managed to stabilize me, and I saw a cardiologist. And after a lot of going back and forth and a lot of nuclear stress tests and angiograms and everything else, mm-hmm. the conclusion was, based on your heart history, the only answer to this, all of your arteries are clear, this, that, and everything else. The only answer to this is that you had viral myocarditis, which means a virus has gone into your heart and caused problems. Your heart has scar tissue in it. And so 2 things. 1, we can transplant your heart. You're A negative. That's not going to be high on the heart list of spare heart. So in the meantime, we're going to slow your heart down, lower your blood pressure with medications, and we're going to see if we can keep you going. And the amount of medications they gave me literally sent me to bed. It was like pop a pill within a half an hour. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go to sleep now. So they slowed me down to a point where I could maybe function 4 hours in a 24-hour cycle, which was fine. I was happy sleeping. But through all of this, my husband was panicked. His wife was going to die. His 7-year-old son was going to be without a mother. Right. There's this ongoing business. He had no idea what to do with it. He took the checkbook and the key and he locked the door and paid everybody off and walked away. So on top of losing my health, I was mourning the loss of my precious business.
Right.
The one I was passionate about. The one that fed me more than anything else fed me at that time in my life, other than my son, obviously, and my husband. But it was just devastating. And the pain that how did my doctor not see what's going on? Apparently, it was obvious. If my heart is running at 223, putting your stethoscope on my chest, you had to have heard that. You had to have felt it. What was my blood pressure when you took it? Right? So now I have another loss to mourn. I had to mourn the loss of the one person I thought was taking care of me, my doctor.
I know that we all have like a relationship with our doctors. My listeners can relate to that. But especially nowadays, I mean, they're given so little time to actually meet with us. They are jam-packed with so many patients. Is it like that in Canada for you, or is that changed?
Oh, it's changed. And this is one of the things that at one point I was advocating, at least I was talking about ad nauseum to anybody who would listen, if that's advocating. How can a doctor care for a patient when the sign on the wall says you can only have 10 minutes and only bring one problem to the table?
Right.
Okay, so which problem means the most? And which one is going to answer? For me, that was the problem because it was starting to go that way then. It's like, yeah, let's treat the symptoms, see you later.
Right.
Until it's acute, we're not going to go looking for it. But when it's acute, it's too late in most cases.
Absolutely.
And the symptoms are a story. You can't do a puzzle with one piece. It takes all the pieces to put the puzzle together and figure out what the picture is.
Yeah.
So, no, Canada has a great medical system. If I have a baby, it doesn't cost me any money to go to the hospital. If I break my arm, it doesn't cost me any money to go to the hospital. It costs me no money to go see my doctor. I can get tests done when I need tests. And, well, they actually won't get done when I need them. If I pay for them at a private clinic, I'll get them done next week. If I wait, I'll get them done in 8 months. So how bad's the problem?
Right.
It's fabulous that we have this health care. It's not putting us into bankruptcy to have babies and to do those things. So there's no complaint about that. However, and I think this is not a Canadian problem, there's just not enough doctors and not enough money to pay them. There's not enough doctors because there's not enough money to pay them.
Can I ask really quick, Terri? Because that statement just turned me on my head. We always hear about how much they're billing us or the insurance, and if there's not enough money, where is that money that they're taking and going? At least in the U.S., it's ridiculous the amount of money that they bring in and what they charge for typical procedures.
Well, in Canada, as a GP, you're not going to get rich. You will as a surgeon or a specialist, because then you can charge it. But in Canada, as a GP, I've had lots of discussions with my current GP and with other GPs who I've met throughout my speaking engagements. You're not making money. You're not making that big money. Doctors aren't rich. But the issue is, for us, Health Canada, there was a big report done in the 90s. In the 90s, it said we need to raise the seats in our medical schools dramatically because our baby boomers are going to be coming to an age where they're going to need more medical care. They're going to live longer. And instead of raising it by 40%, they dropped the seats by 10. That was where the damage started, because now we're not building up our medical profession. I think I see it starting to turn around with nurse practitioners being brought in, and things like that. But I think one of the things I thought we might talk about today, but one of the things about the money is in that Health Canada here is the one who pays those things. But Health Canada also has a nice little amount of money they pay to the Canadian Medical Protection Association. At this point, the Canadian Medical Protection Association has $2.6 billion in the reserve fund and is given money every year by Health Canada, and that money is for paying for legal defenses from lawyers.
Oh my, that sounds very much like the Injured Patient Compensation Fund here in Wisconsin.
Exactly.
So we have this really cuddly term, the Injured Patient Compensation Fund, which you think is supposed to take care of patients, but it does the exact opposite.
Yes, exactly. And this is what doctors here don't actually pay malpractice insurance. They pay, I'm not kidding, a few $1,000s a year into this fund.
Yes, absolutely. And it's crazy because when you have this unlimited legal fund, it robs any victim pretty much of justice, because what, at least in my area, they've done is now they have an unlimited supply of medical witnesses, obviously, because they're a hospital. They have an unlimited amount of legal funding from these funds. The one here in Wisconsin is $1.2 or $1.3 billion. And that's just for one state. Yours, as you said, 2.4?
This is, well, and these are probably old statistics. They could be 10 years old.
Sure.
Because I'm walking around with them in my head forever. But
who has $1 billion fund just to fight legal battles, and then name it something cuddly and nice, like you think you're going to take care of the victims?
Yeah, and who goes to a lawyer? So I go to a lawyer and say, really obvious, my doctor did not follow the standards of practice. She caused this, and then my doctor caused it again. That's a whole different story. Mm-hmm. So I want to sue, and the doctor starts laughing. You can't sue. It's me against the world. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a team of lawyers from 3 different law firms that specialize in this. They're going to pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you just not only lost your health, you lost your job.
Right.
You lost your business. You lost your potential to work. You've lost just about all of that. And how can you focus on getting better if you're focusing on a lawsuit that is so toxic and negative?
Right.
And expensive. So they've got you.
There's 3 laws here in Wisconsin I wanted to run by you to see if you had something similar like this in Canada. So one of the laws is the single person law. So if you're over 18, and you're not married and you don't have kids, and the hospital were to kill you in a medical error, your family can't sue for your wrongful death.
I don't know that we have that law.
Okay.
But I can talk about it. Keep going.
Sure.
Tell me the other story.
The other one, there's 2 more, is doctors don't have to testify against other doctors. So if you're coming from somewhere else that injured you, the new hospital won't even look at what happened to you. They don't want to look at what happened to you. And because it's from an outside hospital, that's the reason that they give, period. They might say things to you in person, like you should never have had this or that, or they shouldn't have done this or that, but they won't go on record for it. So that's the other troubling aspect. And then there's also the I'm sorry law. So if the doctor actually does recognize medical negligence and he apologizes to the patient can't then go and get an attorney and actually sue.
Yeah, okay. I don't think we quite have those laws. And I apologize that I'm not right up to date. But I can tell you the atmosphere. So absolutely, doctors are not allowed to admit to a mistake, because that's with prejudice. They admit to a mistake and it's used against them. So the first thing they're not going to do is admit to it. So the first thing we, as a group, myself as a person, have done a lot of advocating for is everybody needs to heal. Everybody needs to know what happened. Everybody needs an opportunity to be human, to say you're sorry. And the majority of patients don't want to sue and get money. When you've lost a child, no amount of money is going to help you. What we all need to do to heal is to talk. And so advocating for a without prejudice meeting where the patient is involved and all of the medical professionals who were involved all get together and talk and apologize and cry and hug and do what they need to do in a room where that can't be used against anybody. It can come out in other ways if you have a lawsuit,
Sure.
But what they said in that room is without prejudice. And to us, advocates, that's one of the most important things that needs to happen, not just for the patient, but for the medical professionals, because none of them go in there wanting to do harm. Some of them might have gotten sloppy and need to have their hands slapped. Some of them made a genuine error. It was a 50-50 chance, and you on the wrong side of the 50. All these things. Some of them are just bad practices that need to be changed. But if we don't talk about it, if we can't have an open conversation, then nothing is going to get fixed. That's one problem. The other problem is there are cases like myself where I was in a position where I lost a business. I was not able to work for almost 10 years. It was just the effect that this had on me. There was a monetary one that compounded my bad health because it was pressure and stress. To the point where my marriage broke up, to the point where, obviously all our dreams that we had were gone because I didn't have a second income. That is an area in which I should have been compensated,
right,
just like we would if you were in a car accident that wasn't my fault. That's no fault to insurance. It's like, okay,
right.
So you lost an arm. How much does that cost? It's gritty. Nobody wants to hear it. And like you say, an 18-year-old who didn't have a family and dies, there's nobody losing anything. He lost his life, but you can't pay him. So his life's kind of worth nothing financially. But there's two areas, right? There's the compensation and there's the healing.
And there's also what you were kind of referring to, which is that secondary and third injury because of this current way that things are handled and the effects that then has domino-wise on the family or the patient.
Exactly. And so guess what, Health Canada? Because nobody took care of this, because we weren't able to come to all of this, words are losing me here, restitution, emotionally, financially, physically, Now you have
Right.
to take care of me more and longer, because now I have stress issues. I have depression issues.
Mm-hmm.
I have, my family has split up. Let's just talk about it forever. I'm not employing 10 or 15 people. So 10 or 15 people didn't have a job. It compounds. And like you say, these are second and third levels of harm.
At a certain point, I mean, we all want to see the reform, but I think the other aspect is, there's statutes of limitations and all this stuff. I would like to see the victims that have been made to suffer as a result of these, well, at least in my area, legislation and other issues have enabled this, and that was brought about by lobbyists and payoffs and so much that I've come across that I never wanted to hear as I've done my show. It just it makes you realize this perception that we have that people in charge are the people in their best interest, and it's really hard to see that point of view these days. I've had so many guests on pointing out various different things, and at the end of the day, it's the almighty dollar. But even those people are parts of family. They have kids, they have moms and dads and extended family. We need to figure this out. And with that said, what you've focused on is making public awareness. You've been on TED Talks. You've started going on podcasts and other avenues to talk about both your experiences as well as joining the Patients for Patient Safety Canada, which advocate for patient safety and current acts of legislation and trying to reform this, correct?
That's correct. They do now, yes.
And I find that interesting because it's really bringing that tenacity and that drive that you had, and it's that next chapter. So you've been involved with Patients for Patient Safety for over 10 years, since 2009. So
yes, 2009. Yeah,
you've had some time to kind of see the behind the scenes of things, and along with hear the stories of the people that are out there. What hurdles do you currently face that are preventing us from reform in our healthcare?
Okay, so Patients for Patient Safety Canada is a wonderful organization. It's volunteers. And it is a program of the World Health Organization. So there are Patients for Patient Safety groups throughout the globe. So there is one in the United States, Australia, London, Africa. They're all over. Yes. And in order for us to operate, we normally connect with an agency of some sort. So we have been connected with the Canadian Patient Safety Institute, which is funded by Health Canada. So, as a patient volunteer advocating and speaking out, it's really important to us that we do that. We go out and we speak and we talk and we get involved and we are part of forums. And they are fabulous group of people, beyond fabulous. They have dedicated a lot of their time when they could well have been doing other things, all in the name of advocacy. Canadian Patient Safety Institute was a great program leader for us, and Health Canada put the money in. And I'm going to go to a negative place. It's not a negative thing. But again, that is a bit of politics, right? A little bit. So there was a lot of years where we were speaking and we were going out and talking, but we couldn't actually put our thumb on what have we changed? What have we actually changed here? We've talked a lot. We brought patient safety to the forefront. We've forced anybody that has anything to do with health, conferences, trade shows, anything, to bring a patient to speak, a patient who has been harmed. We've got patient safety teams now in hospitals. These are some great things. But the core of the problem still starts with the legislation and the fact that this is still happening. There's still over 30,000 people a year dying from medical error in Canada, and that's only the ones we count and the ones that actually get noted as medical error on their death certificate. Because if I had died, it wouldn't have said medical error, it would have said heart, right?
Are you still the third leading cause of death for medical errors in Canada? Okay. Same as the United States then?
Yes. Yes. That it's fairly global unless you get to a third world country. It's fairly global number. It's a huge number. So recently, and I have been co-chair of Patient Safety Canada up until a couple of years ago. It's the term position. Recently, the person who went in behind me started to focus on no-fault insurance. And it was a place where everybody was sort of backing up going, I don't know if that's where we want to go. And, you know, what do we want to do here? And Health Canada was a little, what are you talking about? Because, you know, we're paying all these billions of dollars of funds to the doctors. But what it takes is politicians. It's reform. It's an act. You've got to change the world starting with the politician. And we all know how difficult that is. Because now we're talking about people's reputations, their jobs, their positions, their politicians. Right. You know, this week they're with you, next week they're not. You know, this week we're the entree, next week we're the garbage in the back, whatever. So it's been a persistent goal to get our politicians. So we started with our local members of parliament, and everybody sort of zoomed out and went out, and we started giving the message to these members of parliament. Then we started to get ourselves in front of the politicians on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. And people are starting to listen. And each province governs its own health care. So we have people in each province who is going after the leaders in our province to make this a priority and to start talking about how this is going to change. Now, you can well imagine COVID came along and we've all gotten very quiet, because this is not a good time to start talking about doctors hurting us.
Well, I think it's probably an important time because at least we have the awareness. You know, we're trying to treat so many people, at least here in the U.S., and the quality has gone down and the errors have gone up. And the way that we handle those victims, you know, is creating secondary and third injury. And so I think it's important to have that at a forefront because we're creating more victims just due to the volume that we're putting through now compared to last year or the year before.
That's absolutely true. Our bad practices were put to a huge test during this pandemic, but for me personally, I am so eternally grateful for the time and the energy and the dedication of our healthcare practitioners. That they did step up, step in, and stay. Yes.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I feel it's like military members. You know, I respect each and every one that serve. And sometimes the issues aren't with our frontline people. It's in the office or the administration or, you know, and that's where we need to focus. I think that's something in common with a lot of corporations. It's just an ethical guideline that we need to operate in,
absolutely.
You know, the best interests of everyone versus the few. But
you know, it all comes down to working. It all comes down to working together. It always does. Whether you own a business, whether you are, you have a family, you're bringing up children, whatever we do, it all comes down to working as a team and communication. And in any area of your life, when those things break down, things go bad. When people aren't appreciated for what they are doing, whatever they're doing, then things go bad.
Yeah. Can I ask, why isn't this a civil rights issue? Why hasn't it gone to that forefront, considering that it's the number 3 cause of death? This is I feel like, especially for the victims, it becomes a civil rights issue. Like, shouldn't we have the right to bring this to trial? Shouldn't we have the right to find justice? And when we have these things in place where we can't, I'm just wondering, through the lens of your experience, maybe you have an answer for that.
We've talked about that, and it certainly is a civil rights issue. We have the right to expect a certain amount of care, and in Canada, we are always forever grateful that we do get this care without paying for it. There was a time that we paid $69.95 a month. It was called Medical Services Plan, and we don't even pay that anymore. That was our small contribution monthly towards our health care.
Let me ask you a question. So we don't obviously have that here in the U.S. So my question for that would be for our listeners that say, well, how does that impact the economy? How does that, how is that affecting the government's ability to pay all this out? Is it affecting care, that kind of thing? It brings the cost down from keeping people perpetually sick, I would imagine. And then it doesn't create the domino effect by putting them into some insufferable situation that they end up having to sell their home or business or,
Exactly. So it's about social services, really, isn't it? So in one way or the other, you are going to pay that money out in social services. So if I lose my house and my job because I'm sick and can't afford to get the health care, then I'm going to take it from you in social services. I'm going to be on a paycheck from you from welfare, or I'm on unemployment insurance, whatever. So I think the balance here is just like that decade we went through when we finally realized that wellness is actually a good thing. If we worked on making people healthy even when they weren't sick, then maybe they wouldn't get sick. So investing in wellness is really a good idea. So investing in our health care costs X amount of money in health care, but it also relieves other areas that the result of not getting good health care could go towards. So I'm not the person who researched any of that information. That's discussions and logic and roundtable talks in general. But yes, in Canada, we don't understand why the United States doesn't have some kind of healthcare system. And we obviously don't understand your healthcare system, so we can't really comment because we don't know what we're talking about, just what we hear.
I think it's just interesting to see an outside perspective from someone that's not located here in the States and how they might view us. I've done a lot of traveling, and I think that's a good check or a good barometer sometimes of where we're at. And I think you said it best, is we don't understand why you don't have something like what we're offering here in Canada, especially considering the might and power and financial assets of the United States. And when it comes down to the social services, it seems like every year more and more of our social services are cut, funding for budgets, things like that. And so what used to be around is a scarcity commodities these days. And it just seems to be getting worse. And so part of this issue that I think that we're having with healthcare is an issue that stretches to maybe an organizational level and how it operates. And sometimes decisions are made that impact lives. I think healthcare is a great example of that. We're able to actually measure that to a certain extent when it's reported, but it gives us an understanding that everything is controlled by the almighty dollar. And if we're going to move forward as a people, it needs to change.
I'd like to give you an example, the almighty dollar and the almighty government, right? Early on in my speaking career, I was invited to go to a primary care facility in Ottawa. And this was years ago. So there are more of those around, and I don't know how. I think this works similar in the States. But, this facility was kind of a new idea. This was a doctor's office like no other doctor's office. So it was a facility that had several different types of doctors. It had a podiatrist, it had a dietitian, it had, GPs, whatever that area needed. So when I walked in and spoke, they all attacked me, not in a nice way, asking questions like crazy. It was 70 people who worked at this primary care, and they took healthcare holistically. So if I walk into the primary care center and say, "Hi, I'm Terri Sabo. I have heart disease, and I'm here for a checkup or a prescription," everybody sorts themselves out and decides who's best to see Terri today. They also say, "Terri, we've got 5 patients like you who come in every month to do this. Could we join you up as a group and see you all at once?" That would save us making 5 separate appointments. We could do the same thing for 5 people in the same amount of time. So a dietitian. So I come in and I have a problem. Maybe I've got type 2 diabetes, and my doctor is humming and hawing, going to send me to some expensive person to take care of this. Instead, the dietitian comes in and talks to me, and I go in for a few sessions, and we get this on track. It was a fabulous idea, and it was run not by the government, but by a business person. Now, the government paid for the health care that was being given in the increments. So doctor's appointment, X amount of money, will give you that. And that business person took it and said, "My job here is to provide great health care on this budget. And how best can I do that?" And he came up with the most innovative ideas. It was an awesome place. And it reduced the amount of people going into emergency at the hospital by 80%. What a fabulous idea. And I got the opportunity to talk to patients and to talk to the staff. And every one of them cried when they talked. It's never been better. This is the perfect answer for me. This is the right way to do things. This was all the right ideas put into one place. It was an answer. Now, the government knows that. These facts and figures are given to them. After I went to see that, I expected those to be popping up everywhere. Now they're starting to pop up now. I'm starting to see more of them. They've been coming on slowly. But if we can't afford more doctors, but we still need to give health care to everybody, we have to find the right solution. And maybe the government isn't the person to do it. Maybe some good business people are. Where it's not all about profit in anybody's pockets. It's about the agenda. What's the agenda? Great health care. What's the budget? This. Okay, let's go. So that's coming from a businesswoman's point, because if I'm running a business and I have X amount of money, I want to get the best. And I've got to give the best to my clients. So I'm going to find the way to do all of this the best way I can. And if I come out of it with money, with profit, that's for me, that's great, but call me stupid. I'm not actually in it just for that. This is a holistic thing. So you guys have a lot. The United States has a lot of places. I've spent time in the United States. I've gotten sick in the United States. My healthcare and my extended healthcare insurance that I pay for in Canada will pay for me to go into a hospital in the United States. And you've got some fabulous privately owned clinics where I can get CT scan, MRI, everything I want that I would wait 8 months for here in Canada, free. And I can go in and get it that you guys can buy it right there, right on the spot. Here it is. And that's awesome. But that's not the answer to our healthcare problem. That's allowing those who have money to get good care.
With our healthcare reform that we've had in the States underneath the Obama administration, that opened up healthcare for the vast majority of people. With Obamacare, that was a big turning point. But I think, like you said, that if we're going to change the system, it has to start with our politicians, and it needs to be, like you said, probably the private sector is the best place for this. Definitely not underneath government control, or at least government administered. That's kind of the push that they've been headed towards here in the States, from what I've seen. And I think that would be, I think that would not be the right direction.
Well, the private sector is a hard one too, because the private sector is about profit, and we all know what percentage of people are making the most money, the ridiculous amount of money. And so it can't go to there. It can't go there. It has to be where the money is used within. It has to be. I mean, we just went through this. Air Canada is looking for a bailout, but while we're waiting for that, I'm just going to pay our top executives $10 million bonus. I don't think so.
Exactly.
That's not the way to answer that. And yet politicians go there.
Anything I can promote?
Please promote. And in the United States, you do have Patients for Patient Safety. U.S., I think that's maybe what it's called. It may be state to state.
I'll put a link in the description.
Yeah, Patients for Patient Safety.
Okay.
And it is the World Health Organization. But my promote, and it's a great organization, and I still belong, but my promote, I advocate for people to take charge of their own health care. So the example being, my doctor loves me. My doctor knows who I am. Of course, if I go to my doctor and he says I'm okay, then everything is. It's not the way it is. You have to promote for good health care. You have to keep asking.
Right.
You have to keep talking. Keep your family and your friends safe by being aware of the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. And when you have an opportunity, promote that to your MP. If you write one letter this year, write it to your MP and ask them what they're doing with healthcare. That has to do with everything in your life. But healthcare is pretty important. So if in Canada it's our MP, I think for you it's your senator or your governor or whoever. But I say there's lots of people out there. If you want to join a group that is doing this at a pretty high level, go to Patients for Patient Safety Canada. But if it's you just, got a family to take care of, go in there, eyes wide open, and make sure you're asking the questions you need to ask. Keep pushing till you have an answer, because there is an answer. If you feel it inside your body, or you see it in your child, then you know there's an answer. If they haven't found it yet, you keep going.
It has been a pleasure talking with you. On a personal note, and if you want, I can share this part too, but I was just curious. You've gone through a lot of adversity, and you've had a lot of loss. I can relate. I lost my business. I lost my my assets. I lost my health. I lost my kids. It was horrible. And for me, it took a long time to finally get back onto the upswing. I think what you're doing with patient advocates and your role that you're playing is probably the same way it is for me, which is the way that I'm able to find healing through my experiences, because I had to find a positive direction to put myself into that was still helping or making a difference in my community. Without that, I didn't feel like I had much purpose. Is it similar with you, or is there any maybe insight you can give me in terms of the healing process? I mean, I don't carry around as much as I used to, but I tell you, I'm still battling. I have with all sorts of headaches, and it's just, it takes its toll, you know? And for you, what would be your advice to me?
I thought it was a losing battle for me to go and try to get somebody to admit to something that was not an industry standard to admit to. When I started a school, when I first taught, when I started a school and I brought in instructors, and even now I am a consultant for private colleges in the province of BC, there is no better way to learn than to teach. There's no better way to heal than to help. Mm-hmm. There's no better way to get through anything than to help somebody else get through it. You learn more about yourself and other people, and the gift of giving, it's got to be the biggest piece of medicine I was ever given. And I think that is much healthier than fighting a losing battle. And I hate to say that for the most of us, it's been a losing battle. Most of us has not healed, even those that received the check. We didn't heal through that check. We held. Our healing started when we started helping others. I wish you all the best. I would love to keep in touch. I have tears in my eyes. I feel connected. It's nice.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for what you've done. And thank you for letting me call you a friend. I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks for giving us a voice.
This is Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story. Exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Bo Tiffany.